Today I'm going to talk about Craig Lowndes. Craig Lowndes is one of the greatest drivers in supercars history, and he has a great legacy these days as well. I thought it would be cool to talk about it because I don't know, I have things that I want to talk about Craig Lowndes, and I think that maybe some of you will want to talk about it as well. My first Bathurst when I was a baby was 1996, which Craig Lowndes won. Growing up, you weren't allowed to like Craig Lowndes, and you weren't allowed to like anyone driving a Ford. You're not allowed to like Craig Lowndes. Marcus Ambrose is a cheat. There was stuff like that saying, "Oh, Craig Lowndes is a bad driver." Russell Ingall's always getting in crashes. Those guys are all Ford drivers. Craig Lowndes drove for Holden Racing Team from 1994 to 2000, and in that time he won Bathurst and he won 3 championships. And racked up the numbers big time. He was one of the best drivers at the time. In 2000, he decided he was going to go to Ford, and he was going to be Ford's man because I'm not sure what the exact details are. I probably need to read a Craig Lowndes book, but he decided he'd had enough of being Holden's man and wanted to go drive for Ford. It's probably proving a point sort of thing, like why James Courtney went to Holden, but at the time he's admitted years later that he had no choice. But Craig Lowndes would have had the pick of everything if anyone would have wanted him on their team, including the people who already had him. And they tried to keep him, but he negotiated out of his 10-year contract that he had, and then he was gone. And so he went to drive for Gibson Motorsport, and which became 00 Motorsport later in the year, which was a very messy political situation because Fred Gibson didn't actually own the team. It was owned by Bob Forbes. It just wasn't particularly well run, and I think that's just the main bit of the problem. That the first year, I think Lowndes had a more competitive car, and in the second year it was less competitive, and frequently it was qualifying in the mid-pack, getting caught in incidents, having a rough time. The only thing that really came out of it in terms of Lowndes' legacy is the green-eyed monster car is iconic. V8 Supercars Race Driver on PlayStation. That car is such a cool-looking car. It's just got Ford on the side. That's all it's got. It's got Ford, and then it's got a couple of other sponsors on there. Then Lowndes went to Ford Performance Racing because the Gibson 00 stuff was falling to pieces. So he went to FPR, which was started from the remains of Glenn Seaton Racing. Lowndes was their lead driver, and they had Glenn Seaton himself, and they had David Bernard, who'd been driving for Stone Brothers for the last 2 years. Their first year was competitive. The car didn't break down as much, but in 2004 they went the completely wrong way. The car was unreliable. When it was on, but when it was off, it was way off. In Glenn Seaton's book, he said in 2004 Barbagallo Raceway, they went through 10 engines, the team, which is ridiculous. But that's just the way that team was run at the time. It was run by British personnel from ProDrive in Britain, because that was the company that owned the team. So 2004, Lowndes getting pretty sick of it, and so he starts talking to Roland Dane, and Triple Eight was competitive at times, qualifying well. They were there, but they had a lot of reliability issues and management issues, things like that. They really needed to work out how to run everything properly. And once they'd sorted all that out, and they'd grabbed Craig Lowndes for 2005, and they grabbed Campbell Little from Stone Brothers. In 2005, Lowndes was back. He was straight in the mix at Adelaide at the first race. He was competitive all season long, not quite banking the podiums and the big results throughout the year. Apparently heading into Phillip Island, he was a chance at the championship. Russell Ingall was the leader, and all Russell had to do was bank the points, and then he'd be the champion. And Lowndes got a penalty for something that he'd done, and they had to cop the penalty, and then they lost the championship. Then in 2006, Triple Eight's even better. Lowndes wins the first race, and then in the second race, he has a crash, has issues with I think he made a mistake, dropped back, and got in an incident with someone, and Not the best start to 2006, but it ended up being a bit of a whirlwind sort of year. 2006 was a bit of a whirlwind sort of year, up and down, very competitive, lots of great teams, lots of great stuff going on. It ended up being Lowndes versus Rick Kelly at HSV Dealer Team, Toll HSV Dealer Team, for the championship. There were other guys involved. Garth Tander at HSV. Jamie wasn't quite up to scratch that year. It was pretty much Lowndes versus Toll HSV, with the Holden Racing Team involved as well. Todd Kelly and Mark Scaife, but Scaife was having too many issues. So it was pretty much Todd was in the mix, but maybe not quite close enough. So it was just sort of one punch one side, one punch the other side, in terms of the battle between Triple Eight and Toll HSV, where Lowndes would get the upper hand, HSV would get the upper hand, and it was back and forth all year. Then you got Bathurst, where obviously Lowndes and Whincup ended up winning that one, and that was a crazy weekend. So Lowndes and Whincup ended up winning that, and second place was Todd Kelly and Rick Kelly. Then it went down to the last round at Phillip Island, and Triple Eight had discarded the Better Electrical sponsorship, and they had a deal with Vodafone for 2007 onwards. So on the side of the cars, they had Lowndes and Whincup on the side of the cars, and the Lowndes bit is, I think, because of its of the slogan for the ad campaign that Vodafone was running, was something about doing it now. I think Lowndes was punted by Rick and then banged into Todd Kelly, and it was a huge mess. There's probably better videos about it, but it ended up being that Triple Eight lodged a complaint against Rick Kelly and Toll HSV Dealer Team, and saying that that's why Rick won the championship. Rick didn't end up losing the championship, so he became the 2006 champion. So heading into 2007, you would think that Lowndes would be the chosen one at Triple Eight. But this was the year that Jamie Whincup stepped up properly for the first time. 2006 was good, it was a bit hit and miss. 2007, he came out firing, got his first pole position, started consistently being in the mix, driving smart. Lowndes was in the mix as well. Lowndes actually had his most consistent year in terms of top 10s of any other year from 2003 onwards. He was really consistent, but he wasn't banking the big points like Jamie was. He was in with a chance at the championship at the end of 2007, but he just wasn't able to make it happen. Jamie and Garth were the ones who were a lot closer, and it was Garth's year. He'd won the most races. He was smashing everyone. For the next few years, Lowndes he had his moments, but he wasn't the best. I guess he got a kick up the arse in 2011 because he would win races, he would get pole positions, and he would come fourth in the championship from 2008 to 2010. And in 2011, I guess he got a kick up the arse from Roland Dane, who said, "Look, you got to do better than this," or maybe he was motivated himself. And then he got second in the championship the next 3 years. And Lowndes got the three-peat at Bathurst. I forgot to mention that. He just rocks up at Bathurst and he just switches on. He loves that track. He was made for that track. There's something about it that he just clicks really well with it. And there are some drivers that are like that, and some drivers that struggle. But Lowndes is definitely one of those guys who just does really well at Bathurst. He got the 1-2 in 2010, and so he got the second in the championship, the 3 in a row. Three runner-ups in a row to Jamie, and so that was the dominant period for Triple Eight. Then in 2014 he sort of dropped back again to fourth. 2015 he was in with a shot, but not quite. It wasn't quite the same. I want to look deeper into that 2015 season, because there was a lot of great stuff going on that year. Jamie struggled, but Lowndes was a bit more consistent, and he came second to Mark Winterbottom. 2016, they created the new entry at Triple Eight, the third car. Roland Dane said he wouldn't do it for anyone else because Lowndes' impact at Triple Eight was so significant, it was just worth it. Not that they were taking huge risks or anything. They would have obviously, the sponsors had to be secured for that car, and they did. They got Caltex, they got a bunch of great sponsors involved. Lowndes had his own personal sponsors. Lowndes had Ludo on his car for 2016. They won a couple races. And I've watched those races because someone's been putting them up on YouTube. So the Barbagallo race that he won, they sort of got lucky. And then the Queensland race, they were just fast. He was on the front row and he was just bolted. It's something that was said in Mark Skaife's autobiography, Scafey Life in the Fast Lane, where he said that Lowndes is just a naturally talented driver. He won't spend the time working on setups and stuff like that and working out how to make the car that little bit better. He'll just jump behind and he'll drive around the problems. He'll do everything just from a driving perspective. He'll nail that, but he won't refine the car. He won't get the creature comforts right so that when you're doing 60 laps or however many laps in the car, you're comfortable and you can drive it better. And Scaife said that because Lowndes set the track lap record at Bathurst in 2010. Lowndes wasn't as involved in setting up that car as Scaife was. I don't know where I heard it, but there was something like Jamie would spend time. He liked getting the tiny little bits right on the car, getting the creature comforts right, setting everything up perfectly, whereas Craig would drive around the issues. All the little creature comforts and things like, oh, this is working on Jamie's car, so Craig will try it and go, gee, this is way better. So there was stuff like that would happen. Like 2017 was a pretty rough year for Lowndes. He was regularly in the top 10 in the races, but he wasn't getting podiums. And in Newcastle, he was 6th in the championship leading in. And then he got 2 DNFs and it dropped him to 10th. At the end of that year, he'd been taken out by Scott McLaughlin. There was a big controversy about it. Apparently a lot of people were being really nasty online. Supercars deleted their comment section, like on the Supercars website. It was mostly the fans were just being crazy, giving Scotty a hard time, giving Lowndesy a hard time. There were conspiracy theories about Roland Dane got Craig Lowndes out at the last lap just so that he could put pressure on Scotty. Lowndes and Scotty handled it like gentlemen. So, dusted themselves off, said, yeah, look, this is just what happened, and got on with things. But there's probably plenty of people out there who haven't got on with things, who are still itching about it. So 2018 comes along, you got the ZB Commodore. It's an exciting time. I watched the live launch of that car, and I thought, this is gonna be really good, because the car looked cool. I just liked watching everything that was happening. He really didn't seem all that competitive in 2018. He had his moments. He had, Tassie, where he got 3rd in race 1, 1st in race 2 from pole. He was doing all right. He was close at times, but he was also, I think at Adelaide, he was outside the top 10. But he just didn't seem all that competitive. And when he announced at Townsville that he was going to be retiring, people were saying, he's still got it, he's still great. And I remember I've read comments where people have said, he was pressured by Roland Dane to retire. But I've got to ask those people, do you want to come 17th in the championship? Because no one does. Unless it's your second year and last year you came last. When you've won championships and had all the success that Craig Lowndes has had, you do not want to go out on a low. You do not want to go out going, we had a great race today and you came 11th. You don't want that. And so Craig retired. He had the great moment in the sun at Newcastle, shook hands with everyone. Everyone was being great. It wasn't the best weekend, but once it was done, it was done. He was going to be co-driver. He won Bathurst that year, which is such an achievement to win Bathurst in your last full-time year. So he was Jamie's co-driver for the next 3 years. And then since 2022 has been the lead driver of the Super Cheap Auto Wildcard. That's been great, because when Lowndes goes into Bathurst, he's in with his shot, because he's driving 888 machinery. He's always great at Bathurst, and depending on what the young driver is, it doesn't seem to matter, because they seem to pick a great young driver. They are in with a shot. Just last year they didn't quite have it. They had issues, and that was just it. I think Lowndes has a great legacy. I saw him in Adelaide in 2020. He had a big bunch of people following after him. I don't know what they were doing. I was lined up to see Frosty, who was doing some signatures and photos. Lowndes walked past with a whole bunch of people following him, and I thought it's just interesting to see. He's still got that fame. When I said at the start of this that you weren't allowed to like Craig Lowndes, weren't allowed to like Ford, that's not me. That's just what I was told. I would rather look at things as I see it and interpret them for myself. And to me, going back through the old races, seeing the end of Lowndes' career myself, seeing the way he carries himself on camera, he seems like a great guy. He seems like he's really got something special. Yeah, that's my little video about Craig Lowndes, talking about it for some fun.